From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Welcome to Chicago Newsroom, our weekly look at government, politics, and the news. I'm Thom Clark. Ken Davis will be back next week. Bruce Rauner wants to raise wages and cut taxes, if you believe his first State of the State speech, but the governor shed little light on how to fix the fiscal mess he inherited, even while promising more money for schools. Meanwhile, it's less than 2.5 weeks to municipal elections in Chicago on February 24th, with early voting starting already in a few days. Will Rahm Emanuel survive 5 debates with 4 challengers and emerge victorious? Has a 21st century version of the old black-brown progressive Harold Washington coalition reassembled? Will the many teachers and other independents running for alderman make the city council less a rubber stamp for whomever becomes mayor this spring? What issues facing the city aren't being discussed by candidates for mayor in the city council? Well, joining us on Chicago Newsroom is John McCarron, a contributing columnist for the Chicago Tribune, and Salim Muwakkil, a senior editor in These Times and a WVON host. Gentlemen, a majority of the panel last week with Ken split over the idea of whether or not we'd have a runoff after this municipal election. What do you think?
I think that we will have a runoff. I think there's enough opposition to Rahm to fuel interest in these varying candidates. I just wish that they would stop trying to, kill each other and, cooperate on this destruction of Rahm Emanuel, if that's their desire.
Do you think there'll be a runoff? And if so, who's going to be the number 2 going up against the incumbent?
If I were betting, I'd say yes, there probably will be. Not due to the quality of the candidates that are running against the mayor or really any issues in particular. I just think this mayor is extremely unpopular on almost like a personal galvanic skin response level, if you will. He just rubs people the wrong way, and I think because there is an African American in the race and a Hispanic and a white ethnic, that there might just be enough of a coalition to keep him from getting to that 50% plus 1 vote that he needs.
So you both think there'll be a runoff. Who do you think will be number 2? Who will get another 6 weeks to make the case?
I think Chuy Garcia will be number 2. I think he's just a natural recipient of a lot of this progressive animosity toward Rahm. I think he's the place where it will crystallize. He's that candidate who can crystallize it.
What do you, as a sometimes suburban observer of city stuff, though you're very involved with the city and particularly community development stuff, can the neighborhood guy overcome the downtown money?
In Evanston, we call that critical detachment.
Okay.
See, it gives us a global view across Howard Street of what's going on.
That's why we had you here today, John.
In the city. But I'll second Salim. I think that Jesus Garcia is probably would, of the 3, would have the largest plurality and enter the runoff.
Actually, there's 4. And I think we need to continuously mention Bill Doc Walls, because he's really a credible candidate. Had he been in that forum last night at TTW, I think it would have enhanced the quality of the debate considerably. He's a knowledgeable guy. He has some very innovative ideas, and I think it's quite unfair to keep him out of these debates.
Well, right after the initial cable cast of this show will be the WLS debate tonight, and he will be on that one, so perhaps he'll have a chance to show, although a lot of his style at the Tribune Forum was interrupting.
Yeah, that's true. He was
although I was impressed
obtrusive
with his command of the budget facts.
Indeed.
He certainly knows those numbers. Do you think voters pay attention to that kind of discussion amongst candidates over, $500 million this deficit, $300 million that deficit?
Unfortunately, no. I mean, they should, because those are the big issues that need to be addressed. The pension crisis at every level. I mean, state and local. But instead, we get these sort of moronic discussions about red light cameras and things that and whether people should have dibs on the parking spaces they shovel in front of their houses,
Well, John, you don't think red light cameras are a worthy issue?
I think they're a good idea, is what I think. I think when the mayor says they're freeing up officers to do police work rather than ticket people who are going through red lights, I think that carries a lot of weight. Automation, technology, cameras, I think are the wave of the future, and they're very efficient, more efficient than in many cases than human beings. So I just think it's a bogus criticism to throw
Well,
at
at
the
the very
city.
least, it's raising enough revenue to cover the overtime for cops, since we're not hiring new cops.
Well, nothing wrong with raising revenue. I mean, I think they should double the number of red light cameras. I mean, they really make people drive more cautiously. That's a good thing.
Well, as someone who considers himself a grandpa driver now, I've gotten 2 red light, not intersection, but the speeding cameras, in part because they're not that well marked, and they're in
That's true.
sort of odd locations, supposedly near a park, but in the one case, it was quite a ways away, and I understand I was caught just like the mayor was speeding through red lights this past week, but I really see it as a nuisance tax. I think that's why it comes up in when maybe there's a fairer or a better way to raise money.
And it's regressive, it targets those least capable in many ways, and because most they're concentrated in areas where there are low-income drivers, and it's difficult to pay these $100 tickets, and then they escalate. I think they double the cost if you are delinquent. So they are very, very strongly resisted in the black community.
I think one reason these kind of issues come up is that there is that kind of resistance, but I think those, whether you allow dogs in Maggie Daly Park or dibs, do you agree or not, those are the kind of issues that might actually get the voting public engaged in the campaign.
More's the pity, and to some extent I blame our journalism for, these are fun stories to put out in the front of the paper or lead the news, so that's what we get. Salim has a more interesting issue and word, the R word, regressive. It is regressive, and somehow I think it's we're missing the boat as journalists to educate people on what's regressive and what's progressive, which is why our state has a flat income tax, which is goofy. Maybe one of the issues that ought to be discussed is whether we ought to have a municipal income tax, and whether that tax ought to be progressive, related to how much you make.
So let me continue in that frame for a moment, because I would like us to talk about issues that are maybe undercovered so far in this campaign. They're probably, if the property tax rise is off the table, at least no one wants to talk about it. I've identified at least 5 other potential revenue streams the city or possibly the state could try to tap in no particular order of importance. The commuter tax is one thing that at least one of the candidates, if not 2 of them, have really supported. Do you see that happening in Chicago, standing on its own, without, they need some kind of state approval, I think, in order to go forward to that? Is an income tax a fairer way to raise needed revenue?
Well, without sounding like I'm backtracking on myself, I think municipalities have to be careful about making themselves non-competitive with their neighbors, just as states do. So I'd say the wider the area for that income tax, the better, and then you'd have some sort of pro rata apportionment of who gets the revenue from the tax. Maybe a regional tax, maybe a statewide tax.
An all-in-one RTA tax that covers more things than just pace buses?
Well, yeah, and certainly insofar as the RTA depends on sales taxes, we ought to put an immediate end to airlines buying their jet fuel out of Kankakee to avoid the RTA tax and that sort of thing. I mean, that's the kind of thing that does belong on page 1 and in the lead of the news, because everyone wants to beat up on government this and government that, but when you start looking at the kind of loopholes that are being used, for instance, the state of Illinois' corporate income tax, I mean, it's kind of outrageous.
Yeah.
What about a transaction tax?
That's one of my favorites. It apparently
the
is very
so-called Robin Hood tax nationally.
Yeah. I think that's such an excellent idea. It's hard for me to believe why it hasn't caught on, especially in this era of rampant financial capitalism. And this casino-style capitalism that has really wrecked so many economies. I mean, and there's nothing being produced to make up for it in the consumer world. We don't get anything from it. And so I think that this is a logical idea.
Well, as consumers, we may not get the best price if we sell stock if some electronic trader has moved in ahead of the line doing the fast, rapid changing.
Yeah, and Salim, don't forget there are plenty of people waiting tables over at Gene and Giorgetti's every day at 3 o'clock when the traders go over there to have their filet mignon.
Is that a hands-off kind of thing, given how the mayor made his millions?
I think if it were done right, I wrote a column for the Tribune for tomorrow, saying, really the governor's amenable to a service tax. Well, does he mean just haircuts and car washes, or is he talking about financial services?
Absolutely.
I just
something
asking,
to look forward to.
Just asking, but we've got to worry in this case about the CME Group trade going to London, let's say, or Singapore. And we really do. I mean, that's
London has a transaction tax.
Well, there you go.
There
you go. And I don't see why it couldn't. The millage rate, less than a penny rate on it per transaction, could be so low that I can't imagine it would cause anyone to pull up stakes.
I agree.
We're losing our viewers as we talk about millage rates, but let's push forward here.
No, but I think
you
that
mentioned casino
idea,
capitalism.
Right, well, that idea of progressive taxation that John talked about, I think that's going to become increasingly more popular as this wealth disparity becomes much more obvious to more people. The president is even talking about doing away with mindless austerity. He's throwing his hat in with Syriza in Greece, that the radical leftist party. So maybe things are changing. We're beginning to see some turns in the notch here.
I think there's a great show here in looking at the whole income equality thing and the growing recognition. But let me continue on my alternative revenue theme here for a while. You mentioned casino capitalism. We've kicked around a casino inside the city for years. It hasn't gotten very far. The mayor announced this week that tourism is up and doesn't feel like a casino is as needed anymore to draw tourists, which was always part of the rationale. Do you think we'll see a casino as a revenue enhancer?
I was surprised to hear the mayor say that. I thought a casino near McCormick Place, maybe the old hospital site just south of McCormick Place, would have been ideal. I mean, to me, any kind of gambling, even especially the lottery, is a tax on stupidity, really, or a tax on ignorance. And it tends to work, especially the lottery, work on lower socioeconomic groups.
I see it a tax on poverty myself.
That could be said. I thought the best place for a casino would have been Rosemont, frankly, but everyone got upset because of potential mob influence in that community, alleged. But I mean, the best kind of casino is the one that draws revenue from people who don't live here, which is why Northwest Indiana is so well positioned, because that's where our gamblers, many of them, need to go to wager.
So, notwithstanding our difficulty in getting medical marijuana up and running, wouldn't cannabis freely available, as Colorado has done with the appropriate taxes, be a revenue source to look at?
I was glad to hear that Chewy suggested that as a possible way to raise revenue. I think that's inevitable, really. I mean, there's this whole the war on drugs is such a unproductive pursuit. It has been revealed as such to everyone. I think it's incredible that we continue to persecute it, and I think that's inevitable. That we're going to begin to enact policies like Colorado and like Washington. I have a daughter in Washington, and she doesn't see any increase in crime, and in Colorado things actually are better. So the evidence is rapidly forcing us to reach the conclusion that we need to change our policies on cannabis.
Imagine the amount of law enforcement resources that would be freed up to do other public safety if they weren't chasing marijuana users.
And the incarceration rates would which is really where it has really been most devastating, is in the black community, with young black men who have used that as a way to gain entrance into the underground economy, and that would change.
Assuming, to move on to what I'll call the potential land grab issue that kind of comes up around the side, we have two new public institutions being proposed. Some refer to Darth Vader and the Lake for the Lucas Museum, and of course the Obama Library. I think everyone agrees Obama's library should be here, but where is another issue. I can see all sorts of benefit for the West Side site, which hardly ever gets talked about, or what about the Michael Reese site the city owns? U of C, I don't know, should we be giving over parkland to make sure the library ends up here? As a matter of public policy or future growth of the city, John?
I was a little bit underwhelmed by the U of C graciously offering to take city Park District parkland as their site for the, although it didn't raise too many eyebrows right away, maybe it was misreported at the beginning or underreported, the fact that they were grabbing essentially the same piece of property that would have been the
Olympic,
the stadium,
yes.
exactly, for, and you know, maybe that would have remained there. But then again, that's something, you know, athletic facilities and parks, assuming it would be opened up to the public, would be and probably a more amenable use than a library. I think part of it depends on what you want the library to be. I mean, is it going to be do we want it to be a tourist attraction? I think probably the answer is yes, we do. So maybe you don't want to put it, let's say, down at the old Southworks site, and maybe you don't even want to put it down at Washington Park. Maybe you want to put it closer to the Loop. And frankly, I see none of the sites right now attempting to do that. You know, to be near the convention hotels and whatnot.
Right.
But we shall see. I don't think you want to use it as an urban renewal device, which is seems to me, at least the further west of the UIC's proposals seems to fashion it as.
I've been chomping on the bit to hear your opinion on the Lucas Museum. that wonderful parking lot that was supposed to be parkland, if I'm not mistaken, when the museum campus concept originally came in. For a World's Fair that was proposed in 1992, if I recall, was when that campus really came out. It was a kind of a Jane Byrne scheme. At least the roadway part of that happened. And some nice reclaimed, better working parkland. But south of 31st Street, Southsiders are still waiting for the overpass, which they're finally beginning to build. I mean, there's still uncompleted parts of the south side there, and now we're going to plop a museum that looks like heck in the first renderings. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that rendering has been scrapped. There are, you know, future renderings being composed even as we speak, I'm sure. But no, I think number one, the Obama Museum. I think that Washington Park would probably be a good location for it, even parkland. I mean, I'm not one of those who object to using parkland for a purpose like that. And I think it could be multi-purpose. In Chicago, there's such a rich history of black political empowerment here. I think it could serve a purpose as sort of a repository for all of those stories, and culminating the election of our first black president. I think it's a perfect story for Chicago's South Side.
Mm-hmm. Seems to me, too, that there could be a trade-off involved. You know, the right across the street from Washington Park is the neighborhood of Washington Park, which has more vacant lots because of foreclosures and demolitions and whatnot than any other neighborhood in the city. Why couldn't the city, I mean, if they go along with what Salim suggests and grab that corner of Washington Park, I think should be some compensatory parkland created.
Precisely. I think so.
In the Washington Park neighborhood or the Woodlawn neighborhood.
So the Lucas Museum, the Obama Library, those are two major public work type institutional developments that the mayor has clearly staked part of his first 4 years in office on. But has he kept his eye on the prize for the rest of issues the city might be facing? We can talk about schools if you want, but I'm really looking more at other development issues that the city is facing. A Rust Belt city that may be emerging better than some other Rust Belt cities, but we're still not sure yet. Manufacturing is probably never going to really come back the way it once was here. We don't have stockyards anymore. How do you think the current incumbent has kept his eye on the prize in terms of the future development of the city?
I think this mayor knows exactly what he's doing when he looks at the future of the economy. When I see Google being attracted out to the near west side and these other high-tech, high-concept startups being added. He seems to be refashioning the city colleges in that direction. Malcolm X going to out by the medical center going to high. I know you're grimacing, Tom, because you don't want me to do a campaign ad for the mayor by any means. I think, and it pleases me no end to hear you say that the era of manufacturing, or at least assembly type manufacturing, assembly line manufacturing is over, because that wasn't what you all were saying back when Harold was mayor.
It was 30 years
Mayor
ago.
Wash. Well, yeah, that's true. But I mean, it was even obvious back then that we were going to more of a service, high technology economy, and that there was almost a bipartisan consensus to remove the means of production in this country to Mexico and then to Asia. Really, a bipartisan.
That's right.
I don't
It was
see
bipartisan.
anybody,
I was going to say Clinton-esque, but it was bipartisan. The way the trade deals were
Bill
put together.
Daley-esque too, right?
Except for the sucking sound guy. I forgot.
Sure.
What was his name?
Howard Dean?
No. The millionaire who ran.
Oh, yes.
From Texas.
Perot.
Perot, right.
Very good.
Right, exactly.
I don't know where those kind of memory banks come back. But he was fun, wasn't he?
He was fun.
Fun, and he was the only one willing to predict what
right.
I think everyone realized
That's
would
right.
happen once the labor market would be globalized.
So where might the mayor be vulnerable in not paying attention to what's coming up around the corner?
Well, I think the issue of unemployment and income inequality, mayor 1%, that's his vulnerability. And I think if that can be pushed, if he can be shown to be one of the culprits in this growing disparity, I think that would be one of his most powerful vulnerabilities. However, I think also, the mayor, as John points out, he has his finger on the pulse of the economy. The economy is certainly moving in this direction, and unless there's some compelling alternative vision produced by the opposition, I think that the mayor will be triumphant.
Do you think he'll overcome the animosity that was growing up around the teacher strike and how he closed schools?
No, I think that it will continue to nag him. I don't get it. Maybe this is because I do live in Evanston, but I just don't get how closing 50 schools earns him the kind of animus that it has. I mean, I understand the families who were immediately affected in the neighborhoods, and they were by and large minority African-American neighborhoods, because if you track them, they were the neighborhoods where most of the public housing was torn down and quote unquote replaced. We had 400,000 school desks, desks in the system, and we only had 300,000 kids. So I think one could argue actually that, maybe they should have closed 100 schools, not 50, and maybe Mayor Daley should have started closing these schools earlier. Was there a decent process?
I think that's the rub.
Leading up to it?
That's the rub.
No, there wasn't.
That's the rub.
It seemed to be by fiat, or you have this modern community meeting thing where you come in and you make a statement and no one's really listening to you, and then a prior conclusion is ruled as the
I mentioned in the opening that we have a lot of teachers and other independent candidates running for city council.
And I think that's one of the outcomes of this school closing. It has provoked this animosity in the teachers union that has, kind of propelled them into the political arena much more fulsomely than they ever had been before. And now they're offering a lot of challenges, aldermanic challenges to the mayor's people. And they are providing Chewy with a lot of his finances, and so I think that's one of the outcomes of this school closing.
But you've written recently that the Black-Brown coalition hasn't quite coalesced.
No, it is not quite gelled.
It's probably another whole show, but
Yes,
briefly,
yes.
why?
Well, primarily issues of immigrant labor. That's the primary rub. The establishment black leadership is pretty much in league with a black-brown coalition or alliance, but the grassroots organizations are a little less ready to get involved with Latino groups because they see them as threats, economic threats, or economic challengers, and they would rather us focus on developing a kind of autonomous black thrust rather than to be dependent on a coalition effort.
Do you have a sense, since you cover some of these neighborhoods, that any of these independent city council candidates will break through? Is there going to be a change in the city council from what you can tell? It's a crystal ball kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I strongly doubt it. The mayor, I mean, there are only 5 or 6 aldermen, if that, who regularly vote against the mayor on any given issue, and so I don't see a magic 26 showing up out of 50. No, I really think it's almost to the point where incumbency is a big deal. You have awards like the 17th down on the Mid-South Side with where Latasha Thomas isn't running for re-election, and Father Flager has endorsed another candidate, as has the Tribune endorsed the same candidate. So there's going to be some turnover there. I noticed. I think the Daily relative, Mr. Thompson, will probably win in the 11th ward. He's also been endorsed by the.
Finally, should we allow dibs for parking places after a big snow?
I'm with the mayor on this one. You dig it, you own it for a little while.
John?
I think we need to have progressive dibs, so it somehow would be income related to the people. No,
there we go. My thanks to John McCarron and Salim Muwakkil for a marvelous conversation. I want to quickly congratulate the 2015 Studs Terkel Community Media Award winners, Daryl Holliday in the Illustrated Press, Mala and Ahira Jirka from the Chicago Sun-Times, Monica Ng from WBEZ, and Sharon Cohn from the Associated Press. They'll be honored March 12th at Columbia College. Contact Community Media Workshop for more. I also want to remember Andrew Patner, a Chicago cultural icon who passed suddenly this past week. Will greatly miss his Sun-Times reviews and Facebook banter. Many thanks to Ken Davis for letting me sit in his chair, and to the wonderful Can TV crew led by Greg Boozell and Kerry Ruckel. You've been watching Chicago Newsroom, a community service of Can TV. Of course, you can always find us on cable, but you can see us anytime on the web at this address. Check us out there or subscribe on iTunes. Ken Davis will be back next week. I'm Thom Clark. Thanks for joining us.